Your name's not down, you're not coming in. Not tonight, not tonight.
Security Nation.
Your name's not down, you're not coming in.
Our expertise allows everyone to have a great time,
Your name's not down, you're not coming in.
so they can feel safe and enjoy the occasion to the max.
Not tonight, you're not on this.
Welcome, guys. We are finally here for our long-awaited podcast. It's been a little while, and we have some fantastic guests on today. So, let me introduce my guests. As you know, we've prompted this podcast, and we're going to be talking about knife crime, the raising concerns with knife crime, and what we might and might not be doing. So, my first guest, let me introduce you. This is Tim Williams. He's the Chief Inspector of Southampton Central, Southampton City Police. And good to have you on, Tim.
Thank you very much. Yes, I am the Inspector, as you say, of Southampton City Centre for Hampshire and Isle of Wight Police.
Fantastic. My next guest is Gary from Special Projects. I keep saying that one. Gary had the ability yesterday to teach or do a training course for us. Gary, introduce yourself and let us know what you guys do.
Yeah, so my name's Gary Simpson, or Gaz Simpson, and I'm one of the directors at Special Projects Group. We are a security and training company that provides innovative ways or solutions to spot threats before they fully manifest. So my big game is behavioural detection and NVC analysis. So teaching people how to read that human landscape, teaching them how to recognise threats purely based on behavioural cues and non-verbal communication, our body language. Yeah, really happy to be here.
Brilliant. So, as we said, we're going to be discussing a number of topics today, but mainly around knife crime. We're going to ask Tim some questions. If there's any sort of questions that you guys want to ask, by all means, you can message in. And what we're going to do is talk about some of the things that are coming in, what can be done, what we hope to see, in an ideal world, and what's potentially there. So, yeah, Tim, let's start with you. Firstly, Southampton, and let's be really honest, we know that there is a rise in knife crime. We know that it's getting worse by the day, I guess.
Knife crime has been bad. I wouldn't say it's increasing dramatically right now. We are not following the national picture. Nationally, knife crime is rising. Southampton has been fortunate more recently. But what we are seeing is young people involved with knife crime. We are seeing weapons still being used on the streets. And for that reason, it remains a priority for us.
I suppose, we shouldn't just say knives. Knife crime is prolific, but weapons in general.
Sharp objects.
Offensive weapons, we're seeing a rise in that, and even to the point of people trying to cloak weapons as key rings, as whatever you, and turning them into weapons. So, yeah, it's an issue for us. Gary, what do you think?
Yeah, it's, you know what, I was in the research up to this point, I was doing a lot of statistics around knife crime. Like, by the end of 2022, there were 49,489 related offences. That jumped up to 52,969 offences by the end of 2023. By the end of 2024, it's been 55,000. So it's a constant pressure that keeps on releasing. And, it sounds bad to bash like young people as well, but 1 in 5 knife offences are committed by people who are under
I'm
the age
no
of 18.
mathematician there, but that's roughly 10,000 knife crimes or crimes a week.
Yeah.
Correct?
Something like that, yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Hang on. Somebody do the maths for me, but it's a lot. It's an issue. What do you think we've got? What can we do what are the police doing to bring in any sort of changes? What are you guys focusing on?
So I think at our level on the street, on the front line, there's probably 2 strands to it. One is education and one is enforcement. So education, we work with our schools, within our schools. We work, our youth offending team work with perpetrators. We work with local charities who work with young people. And it's about understanding why they're carrying knives. It's about explaining to them the risks of carrying those knives and weapons and the consequences of it. The second strand would be enforcement. Obviously we're police officers, or I'm a police officer, so this is about catching those who are ignoring those risks and continue to bring the knives into the public areas and actually not just public now. We've got the offence, the newer offence of the weapons in private places. So we're talking about your zombie knives and your more dangerous ones. We're not talking about standard kitchen knives. So that's where we are at a basic level. Above us, we're looking at social media plays a big part in all of this, I think, and why
it's almost cool to carry a knife
and
now.
this is the problem. Young people
I see
especially are seeing other people, other gangs, other groups carrying knives, and they want to have a bigger knife than that, and it becomes a bit of a competition. And that's the worry. How do you stop that cycle of carrying weapons and knives? And that's what we're working hard to do.
It tends to be. I mean, I've seen it, and something you mentioned just then. You used the word consequences. What are the consequences? Be honest. Do you think the consequences are even anywhere near where they should be?
Well, I think you probably have to ask the people carrying knives that. What does it have to be for them to stop carrying a knife?
I'll be honest. I think some of them don't give a shit. That's the truth of it. I think some people do not give a shit that they carry a knife. And please don't take this the wrong way. I think sometimes they don't give a shit that police officers are coming. I think they have no respect, or I had an inherent fear of a police officer growing up as a kid. Back in the day, and I think a lot of people would agree with me, if I did something wrong, cop would grab me down the scruff of the neck, march me down my driveway, throw me to my dad would give me a whack round the head, the copper would give me a whack round the head, but I didn't want to be, certainly, put in the back of a police car. And I've had one or two brushes with the law in my time. I'm not perfect. I'm close, but I'm not there. But I had an inherent built-in fear of police officers because you don't want to get nicked. Today, I think we are dealing with the worst generation ever. And I think that the teenagers of today, I think the problematic ones, and I don't tie everyone in this, but some of them just don't give a shit about police. They don't give a shit about the consequences. It's almost say a gang culture, a thing. And I'm sure some of the people out there listening will probably say, you know what, it's right. But what can we do to change that?
It's an interesting one. It's never going to be as clear cut as old teenagers who carry knives are bad and the other way around, because one of the interesting things that Tim said there, it's social media and everything like that. There's a psychologist or scientist or whatever he was called Kurt Lewin, and he came up with the equation that person's behaviour is the function of the person and the environment, and we've got to look at the environment that people are in. You mentioned there about the consequences of being thrown to the police and everything like that. If somebody doesn't deem the consequences to outweigh what they're going to get through committing a knife crime or carrying knives or anything like that, they're just going to keep on doing it.
This is just my opinion, but it used to be mandatory. If you were caught with a knife, one that was over 2.5 inches, if you were caught with a knife on the street, you would be going to jail. That was a fact. And as you well know, that's not the case now. You can get caught with a knife, you don't go to prison, so there's no real fear of prison because there's no guarantee of it. I had a chap attack one of my guys with a machete, and he walked out of court, no problem, because he said he had a bad day and he had mental health. And I shit you not, he walked out celebrating. The Echo took a picture of him, and he got a bit of community service because they said it would be detrimental to his mental health. And he can walk up and down Southampton City Centre with a 15-inch machete. You don't go to prison. Now, my opinion, and it's a very basic, and obviously this is, I think you get caught with a knife, mandatory 5 years. If you're walking around on the street with a knife with an intention, and obviously each case is taken on its own merit, if you like, if that's the right word. But, you know, if somebody walks into a fishing shop, buys a fishing knife to fillet his fish, and he gets caught going into the car, that's a different story. But when you've got kids, and I think everyone knows where I'm going with this and what I'm trying to say, but when you've got kids, gangs, kids in the streets, in parks, if they're carrying a knife, there is no single reason why they should have that knife. Nothing that can justify that. They should be going to jail. And if they knew that, do you think that that is going to help?
I think as well, just on that, just because it's a weird one, because we need to look at the not the consequences, but the reason why that person is carrying a knife. You will have the hostiles, and we talked a lot about hostile behaviour and hostile intent yesterday. But you'll also have the people who've been coerced into doing this. You know what I mean? It's like anything with drugs. You know, if you attack the addicts, you're not doing anything. That's just placebo, isn't it? What you really want are the people behind that. Who's forcing these people to carry knives? You know, why are they doing it?
Yeah.
Right,
So what you're
that's
saying
something we
with
need to do.
with the drugs, no point in going to the people
Yeah.
taking them, but you need to find the dealers.
Yeah.
And what you're saying is, if I'm reading that right, is that why are they carrying a knife in the first place? Now, I don't believe there's any real reason to justify it. I think that if somebody says, well, I'm in fear of my own safety, it still doesn't justify you carrying a knife out there. It's like me saying on the door, I know I'm going to have a fight tonight, so I've got knuckle dusters just in case.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm pretty sure you're going to have something to say about that if you catch me on the door with knuckle dusters.
I think Gary makes a good point. You know, it could be a case that, and it is actually the case quite often, that people know that if they get caught with a knife, they're going to get arrested, they're going to go down the cells, and there's going to be a consequence of some sort. It might not be the 5 years you aim for. But
That's just my opinion. I mean,
yeah,
some
no,
people
no,
agree
no.
and some
It's,
don't.
You know, you need to have a punishment. But what I would say is that there are some people who will, vulnerable people perhaps, who are made to carry that knife on behalf of somebody else. Especially, you know, young females. You know, they don't get stopped and searched as much as young males do, and so therefore, are they considered a perpetrator or are they a victim in this? And this is where I think perhaps the blanket, if you've got a knife, you've got no excuse.
No, I think each case needs to be taken on its own merit. I think, you know, if that is established, like you said, that she's made to carry a knife or something along them lines, that I sort of side with you there. I think,
Yeah.
you know, everything's got to be taken on merit. But, you know, and let's be honest, if you caught 10 teenagers in Southampton in the nighttime economy walking around with a knife, 10 of those teenagers, 9 of them will not have a single good reason to carry one. And I find that hard to actually say that one would have a good reason. And if it was the fact that they were forced, under pressure, being forced to carry that for somebody else, if that came out in the investigation and the wash, fair enough, you do what you need to do. What I'm saying is that it seems to be so common now, and I supply a number of doormen, and every weekend we're looking at what potentially, and you know, the course yesterday, when I brought you guys in specifically, you did behavioural analysis with us. You showed us the body language of hostiles. You showed us what to look for, and we'll touch on that later. But for me, it just seems to be something which is happening, and we're spiralling, and we're really not doing anything more to stop it at the minute. And I don't know if that's something we can bring in, or what can we put in place to maybe slow it down and bring it back from the brink, because it's going to get worse.
Right.
I think it starts at the top. You know, at the end of the day, it comes back to where these knives coming from. You know, I mentioned a minute ago about the zombie knives. You know, it's those sorts of weapons. There is no excuse for those to have, you know, be on the street at all. They're designed and manufactured and sold for the sole purpose of creating fear and causing maximum damage.
Yeah.
That is why there are new laws that have come in recent years around having those in a private place, importation, selling. It's attacking those at the higher end of the chain. You know, I think parents have a role to play in all of this.
For sure.
Or guardians.
For sure.
You know, what are your children ordering to the home address? What are they carrying when they're leaving the house? I'm not suggesting that parents should be searching their children before they leave, but you know, I do question sometimes. Do all parents know, you know, what is in their kid's bedroom, under the bed? You know, I've been into many houses, many kids' bedrooms for searches for various reasons, and you know, what you find there, you know, I wouldn't want my children having these sorts of things in their bedroom. So I think there's a role to play there behind closed doors, where, you know, where police often don't get a chance to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I fully agree. I think that if we're sort of talking about children upwards, I mean, what can I ask you? What's the youngest you've found with a knife? What's the youngest age?
Well, I mean, obviously 10 is the age of criminal responsibility, and you know, we have seen knives, you know, anecdotally, I won't quote specific jobs, but you know, 10, 11. You know,
So you've
there
seen
are
10,
knives.
11s, and I might be a bit naive in thinking this, but I'd hope, and I say this, I hope that everybody, that no kids should carry them, but under 12 and under 13 is incredible. Why would an 11 and a 12-year-old have a knife? And you'd have to ask yourself, what is the background? What's the upbringing? What environment are they in? And what has stemmed that thought? I know, Gary, tell me what you think.
Yeah, so we can look at like background and culture and everything like that with it, but so to give everybody a bit of an insight, so my background is the Royal Marines, and then some special operations as well. When we were in Afghanistan, like with the Taliban, who were the aggressors, they would observe our behaviour, and they would look at us and see what we let slip, what we didn't let slip. And out of that came a very worrying trend. So they started to realise that you've got kids running all over the place. And we're all friendly people. We're trying to put on a good show.
You'd allow the
build
kids
hearts
to get
and minds.
close.
They get close. They used to run up to us. We would give them like our schmooly parachutes. We'd give them some sweets. We'd give them some water. So what happened from then on was the Taliban would realise, oh, if I want to close the distance between these guys, I need to start using kids. So then they started putting IEDs on the kids. They started having kids with wheelbarrows full of explosives running straight after us. These kids didn't even know what the consequences were going to be. They just got told, oh, why don't you take this to that friendly soldier up there? And then sure enough, it blew up. And I think that is a huge part to play in why we're seeing young kids, young females as well, carrying knives. It's because the people who are pulling the puppet strings, the real hostiles behind this, the county lines gangs,
We'll touch on that in a minute.
organised crimes and everything like that, they know that the what did you call it at 10, your legal responsibility or whatever it is,
age of 10,
they know the rules. Hey, they're career criminals. They know the rules exactly like any lawyer would, and they think, right, okay, they're going to be less likely to be searched. They have less consequences when something goes wrong. And I think that's a huge contributing factor as to why we're seeing 1 in 5 knife offences being committed by people under the age of 18. But then on the flip side, once that starts to get embedded, these young kids, their social status goes up because they're carrying knives and they're hanging around with adults who are, you know, a little bit rough, and they've got all of this power that suddenly comes into it. And then that starts its own behavioural journey where people are like, right, well, I'm cool because I'm carrying a knife. And then you've got it all in social media. So last year at a school in Wales, I think it was the Aman Valley or something like that, there was a 14-year-old girl who stabbed 2 of her teachers and a 15-year-old student. But when she was reprimanded and arrested, it was all about celebrity. She was like, oh, well, at least I'll get in the news then. You know, I'll be a celebrity. That's what it's all about. So it's such a big melting pot.
I think that now at the minute that everyone wants to be, I suppose here I am doing a podcast, but everyone wants to be famous. Everyone wants to get clicks. I think people see the influence, nothing against any of them really. And I've got good friends that got massive podcasts. A friend of mine, Dodge Woodall, he runs a massive podcast. And, you know, you look at some of the influencers, what's the guys from Prime? KSI
I don't
and
know.
the other two, you know, they seem to be like almost hero status for some of the kids.
Sidemen.
These Sidemen and the Cybermen or whatever they are. And I think sometimes the kids see that as a route to being famous, getting money, being a gamer, and all the rest of it. And I don't want to bash any of that because I'm pretty certain they all feel that the kids should be brought the right way, and none of this is violence related. But kids also see that they can become cool, and it's almost a trendy thing now to go, oh, yeah, look at the size of my knife, I'm carrying a knife. What the fuck for?
Yeah.
But to them, it's almost a celebrity thing, and their mates are, oh, do you know, he carries this knife about, we're safe, this and that. You know, and we're probably behind America, because America probably would back then their kids are carrying guns, you know, and today they, you know, and we've not got there yet, I don't believe, but it'll be a matter of time before it goes to that. And I think for you, Tim, the daunting thing is you've got to try and figure a way of slowing this down and maybe reversing it over time. It's not a quick fix, we know that, but the whole subject we're talking about, the rising levels of knife crime, and what poses more dangers and threats to our guys, which not necessarily the 12, 13, 14, 15, 16-year-olds, but the guys that are coming into nightclubs that are 18, 19 upwards, they also are carrying knives, and we are challenged with trying to find that knife. We're challenged with trying to search as many people as we can, and I run a number of festivals and events, and our search policy is very robust wherever we go, depending on the prohibited items, depending on the crowd dynamic, depending on what kind of event it is, we tailor it. I mean, I've you know, I've got the motocross this month, and I know what kind of things are coming with that crowd. I know what comes in with Garage Nation. I know what comes in with Kistery, Poole Harbour Festival, and all the other festivals we do. So we tailor it to that. But at the same time, and this is why I brought you in yesterday, Gary, to train our staff to recognise some of the most subtle hints. And I thought it's invaluable for us to be able to sit there and say we can spot things before they happen. And in a perfect ideal world, prevention is better than cure. If we can get there before it happens, great. But for you guys, and it's a thankless job, you have got a real ball ache task coming in, and it's been progressively getting worse. And you know, for us, I mean, what do you think the police's view of it is? I mean, what are your officers? What's the feedback from your officers? How are they feeling? Because I mean, nobody actually ever thanks the officer for when they do something.
Well, no, I mean, look, our training isn't quite as in depth as perhaps what you, Gary and the team have done for you yesterday. But you know, we have what we call behaviour detection officers, and it's very similar in a sense of, you know, you're monitoring the crowd. What is the baseline behaviour of that crowd, and what's standing out for you? You know, as a really basic example, if you've got a hot summer's day around a train station, everyone's wearing either work attire or shorts and t-shirts. Why is there a guy, you know, stood in the middle of the crowd wearing a bomber jacket and carrying a big rucksack?
That's
those
pretty
ones.
much word for word what we
really
said
basic
yesterday,
stuff.
wasn't it? You know, we spoke about that yesterday, and we said, you know, that's exactly right. But yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no. So I mean, so that's basically, you know, it's about understanding what to look out for, and you know, getting it before it happens. You know, that's really key. You know, the officers on the ground, of course, you know, weapons is always something at the forefront of people's mind. The officers' mind when you're going in for a stop search, when you go approaching a group, when you go to a call where a weapon's being used or mentioned. You know, you've got to be alive to the fact that could turn on you, and of course, there's going to be an element of adrenaline, element of worry, depending on what you're being told. But you know, thankfully, and I'll touch on when I say this, you know, it's quite rare for someone to actually get, you know, attack a police officer and for it to become a serious injury. There's plenty of them, don't get me wrong, plenty of officers getting assaulted every day, but when you're talking about knife attacks,
Yeah.
you know, police officers aren't getting stabbed every day.
So this is a bugbear of mine. So, and this is the thing. So if somebody was to punch one of your officers in the face, they know that the consequences are probably a lot more serious than if they punch me in the face as a bouncer. Now, as a doorman, bouncer, I use that word, some people think we're fair game. And yet, if you hit somebody in the NHS, ambulance service, fire service, you get the same level of punishment as a police officer. But yet the most assaulted workforce are doormen, higher than anybody. And yet it's okay to assault a doorman, no matter where you are in the UK. And yet there's no real punishment any more than a member of the public. But yet why would doormen not put in that same category when we're the ones who get assaulted more than any of you? And that across the board.
It's a risky job, you know, the door staff carry, and there is an element of risk there. But absolutely, you're right. You know, you should not be looking at that as part of the job. You know, nobody should go to work and be punched and the outcome being, well, you know,
It happens
they're supposed to do this job. It's
every single day.
what we need though is and this is where it can perhaps become a bit complicated. You've only got so many staff on duty. Now, if it's early part of the evening, one of your guys gets punched, we take him to the first aid room. We're going to need a statement off him. We're going to need to take some photos. You know, perhaps he doesn't need to go to the hospital, so we can deal with it there and then. That's going to be an hour and a half. He's not on the door.
Mm-hmm.
So we do find quite often that door staff say, "Well, look, I can't afford to come away from the door to give this statement for something which they're seeing as relatively minor." You know, we're talking, you know, if there's a broken bone and they're in hospital, it's different. They're in hospital, they're taken away from the door anyway. But the lower level stuff, so the pushes, the shoves, the elbows, the punches perhaps, you know, it needs to be a two-way relationship. And I think you're right, I think it could be a better process, but we need that buy-in from both sides.
When arresting somebody, yeah, I get that. You know, but for example, one of my guys had his ear bitten off not so long ago. Took you 4 days to arrest the guy.
I mean, I can't comment on specific cases.
No,
What
and I won't put that on you, but
you know,
he obviously was
and
really
another
pissy. You know, he
Yeah.
was very much, well, why haven't they arrested him? Why haven't they arrested him? And I
Yeah,
said,
yeah.
look, calm down, it will happen. But because he is a foreign student who did it, and he is on a sponsorship, it was chosen not to take any action, no further action. But yet he just bit one of my doorman's ears off.
was that a decision from the police or from the CPS?
I'm going to say it was the CPS decision. I'm going to let you off the hook there. But I find that incredible that you can bite somebody's ear off and get NFA'd.
I mean, at the end of the day, we're evidence-led. So
Yeah.
if you've got a victim with injuries who's willing to support, we've got a statement, we've got
It was on
CCTV,
CCTV.
we've got photos, we've got medical notes, and we've got a suspect who's been clearly identified. I can't understand why that wouldn't have gone ahead.
The
but I
reasoning
can't.
I found crazy was because he's an international student on a visa. If they were to send him back, it would cost whatever. And I said, well, that's all right then. You can go around and bite people's ears off and get away with it. I'm saying that a bit tongue in cheek. I am, but you can understand where the frustration from our doorman came from.
Oh,
not just the
absolutely.
doorman. As in the other members of the team. They're like, how the fuck can you get away with doing something like that? And over the years, doormen have been arrested for cracking people. You arrest us. But there would be some common sense applied as to why. You know, if you're attacking my doorman, I expect my doorman to defend themselves. They're not punchbags. And at the same time, we will hand you as much evidence as we can, but this is where I agree with you. The doorman has to follow it through and say, yes, we want this to happen. This is what I need to do. This is what the statement needs to be, and I want to follow through with the charges. A lot of doormen, frustratingly, will say, look, I'll just let it go. And that probably applies across the entire UK. Some doormen just cannot be bothered with it, and sometimes you really need to press forward with it. But again, going forward, we just need to know why the doormen were not put in a category for same as police and NHS staff, ambulance staff, and yet we're the ones who get assaulted more than all of you. You know.
I think you make a valid point, and it is different, and it shouldn't be. So that's something I can take away, I think, and look at, because you know, I suppose where do you draw the line? You know, we're seeing shop staff, for example, you know, assaulted now for
Yeah.
stealing out of the shops. You get, you know, look, anyone who works on the front line, you know, is at risk of assault. Some are more at risk than
But
others.
if you did it in orders of merit,
yeah.
doormen are up there. They're assaulted 10 times more than anybody.
No
You know,
one's gonna
across
thank you at the
every
end.
single doorman. I mean, not being funny, for the people who listen to this, when was the last time you went to a pub or a club and a doorman patted you on the ass and said, yeah, you've been really well behaved, well done? The only time anyone ever really deals with a doorman is on a negative, i.e. we're removing you because you're too drunk, you've been an idiot, you've had a fight, whatever though that reason is.
Yeah.
We're doing a job, and there is no thought process, or there is no thought of any consequences if somebody turns around being taken out by the doorman and goes, I'm just going to whack you. Because he might just whack us, and the doorman might be able to take it, that's fine, and I've been whacked many times over the years, and everyone who knows me will know what the things have happened over the years. But crazy things we see. But when that time comes when somebody genuinely hurts a doorman, he might get let off with a caution. Whereas if that exact same thing happened to you, an ambulance driver, a nurse, anything like that, he's going to jail for 18 months. And that is a frustrating thing for us as doormen, especially when, if you look at the categories, we get 10 times more assaults than you guys. And yet we were not put in that category. And you cannot justify that to me because the figures stand for themselves, you know. But I don't blame you for that, Tim. That's a good thing. So anyway, what does the future hold? What do we think? How do we see this playing out? What are we looking to go? Gary, tell me what you think.
I think we need to stop the trends at the end of the day. We need to address the main reasons why people are carrying knives in the first place. Right, and
The epicenter, why?
the epicenter of why people are doing it. So there's a world-renowned threat analyst and threat detection specialist called Gavin DeBecker, and he came up with a framework that essentially predicts when a person is going to escalate something from threat to a violent act, and it's called JACA. Justification, alternatives, consequences, and ability. You know, a person is carrying a knife because they feel justified to carry a knife. You know, that justification, let's have a look at that. That could be the news cycle telling you that everybody out there is carrying a knife, you know? So I now need to protect myself and I need to carry a knife to do that.
Mhm.
Right? That's one of the justifications. It's not just I want to stab that other person, you know? Your alternatives. What alternatives do some of these people feel to carrying a knife? You know, we need to make people aware of that. What are the consequences? The big thing, and that's where Tim kind of comes in as well.
Yeah.
The consequences to carrying a knife.
I personally think
Yeah.
that the consequences, like I said, everything needs to be taken on its own merit. But I think that the consequences at the moment for carrying a knife are not even remotely close to, you know, do the crime, do the time. Well, if you're going to carry a knife, that minimum time should be set in stone, I think.
But that's just one element of that consequence, you know. If people are going around thinking that it's just going to be me getting arrested as one of the consequences, that's clearly not enough. You know, and adding more time is only maybe going to push the age of people who are carrying knives down lower. We need to look at the other consequences to why people are carrying knives as well. You know, it could be your social standing. We need to eradicate that. And then the final one is your ability. We need to reduce that ability that people have to obtain these knives, to carry them, to conceal them. And we need to improve our ability to spot those things as well.
I'm going to go out on a limb here, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Tim. Most of the knives, and this is just a guess, but most of the knives I would have thought are just taken from the kitchen, as in they're not going out and physically buying them. But, I mean, there might be some, but generally speaking, if and God forbid my kids did this, it wouldn't be worth thinking about. But if my son or daughter wanted to pick a knife up out of the kitchen drawer, how do you stop that? I mean, that's relatively every single household in the UK.
Exactly that, yeah. I mean, every house will have a knife. In terms of I would say actually the majority of the knives that we see are probably not your standard kitchen knife.
No, fair enough.
They are adapted or made for other reasons. It might be a collector's item, like a dagger type style knife. It might be your machetes. It might be your zombie knives. Those are the ones that we see. I suppose going back a little bit to what we said earlier, you know, a young person, I don't think just suddenly decides one day I'm going to take a knife with me. There tends to be a build up to it, and it's that period of time that's they're most vulnerable, and that's where we need to be knowing about it, or perhaps not the police, but the parents, the teachers at the school, the friends that they're interacting with.
So it's the whole background picture, the whole backstory.
If we've got to the point where someone's already carrying a knife on the street, something's gone wrong. You know, I think there's something's happened to make them do that.
I agree.
And it's the signs that we need to look for, and the education, and you know, society needs to be aware of that. Everybody has to play their part to identify.
And I think that generally that's probably where the public can help you, because the police can't watch every kid every minute of the day and watch their upbringing, but you are aware of certain things that happen in certain places, and I'm pretty sure you're aware of certain areas, certain families, and you think, you know what, and I can say it for what it is, but you see some kids and you think, yeah, their upbringing ain't going to be great. You know that there are, and I don't mean to pigeonhole anyone, but families that probably have led a life where they don't care too much about anything, and the kids are brought up in an environment where they don't have too many cares either. And I might be wrong in saying that, but I don't mean to criticise anyone, but that doesn't stop 90% of parents trying to bring up their kids the right way. And parents do the best they can to a point. Some parents obviously fail their children. And for you as police, the backstory could be, we now get why this kid is acting this way. But when it comes to the knife stuff, we need to be able to act upon it in a way where we stop it and nip it in the bud straight away. How you do that? Good question, good answer. Good luck with that answer.
Yeah. I think as well, it's that intent behind it. Because I guarantee, so I'm from Yorkshire originally.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, who are? I guarantee, right, I'm from the sticks in Yorkshire, so up near Osmotherley and places like that. If you go round some of the farms, some of the rural areas, 90% of the young farmers out there will be carrying little pocket knives. But they're not the people that we're after, are
No.
we? We're after the people who've got that intent.
Yeah,
behind
and we
it,
come across
you know?
that,
Yeah.
and we come across the pocket knives, the handyman pocket knives, and I've even, I've seen a lad with a knife. It's his pocket knife, and he said, and he wasn't lying to me. He said it was my grandfather's knife. It was one of the things he gave to me before he died. I keep it with me, and
Carry a knife, save a life.
I
is
understand that,
one thing.
but you're right. They're the people that you tend not to worry about. The young farmers, the people that are doing it. And I can't say it's one rule for one for another.
No.
But it just adds fuel to the fire as it makes it more difficult. If you come and see me on the beach, I've got a diving knife that's about this big, and I fillet my mackerel with it, and I do all the stuff like that. But I'm not breaking any laws. I'm fishing. But at the same time, if I then walk through the town with my fishing knife, you're going to go fucking SWAT team and everybody else. Yeah. So the environment, the place you are, and I think sometimes for us, everything needs to be taken at face value and go, okay, fair enough, it is what it is. But let me touch on something, and you tell me if I'm wrong here. Tim, you'll probably know more about this. County lines. Do you find that, because I know that we're getting a lot of county lines dealers in, I can see them. They do what they do across the whole of the UK, and is this becoming a bigger issue, and is that helping the trend?
I think we're in a much better place now to respond to county lines than we were. County lines, it's been around for a number of years now, but we've got really good relationships with neighbouring police forces. Obviously we're Hampshire Isle of Wight. We are an hour and a half tops up to London, and we do see London subjects coming down on the train or by car, and ultimately they're looking to take advantage of vulnerable people to get into their addresses, and then it's that it's a taking over of local drug lines, and that's when you start to see the violence. So county lines is an issue because it creates that violence and it takes advantage of vulnerable people, so it's almost double-hatted. But yes, it is a problem. It's a problem, across the country. We do see it here in Southampton, and it's about us identifying those vulnerable addresses quickly, identifying who's in those addresses.
So what we spoke about before we were on camera, and I said this weekend I saw this happen, and I knew full well where they came from. And for me, I'm like, this is crazy. You're in a city that, I love Southampton. I was born here, played here, and I saw it, and it was at 2 a.m. I'm sat here thinking, it's like the Wild West. And I knew that these guys weren't from Southampton. I've been doing doors long enough to recognise 90% of the people here, and these guys were not. And yet, I saw it, and like I said, I spoke to you, and I think it's crazy. But I don't know how big a problem it is, but it seems to be a very real problem, if that makes sense.
I think it's probably underreported, if I'm honest. The job we spoke about there, it wasn't reported to us.
No.
So if we don't know it's happening, it's difficult for us to take action. But that's, there's ways of finding out who these people are. With CCTV, looking for witnesses and such like. But there's probably an element of fear why people don't call us. People want to stay out of the way.
It's interesting. You just said it's underreported. Is that a big problem for the police?
Well, you never know what's not reported. So
You
for that
don't
reason,
know what you don't know.
exactly.
Yeah.
So it's difficult to put a figure on it. But my perception is when I talk to yourself and I talk to the community, often people say to me, "Oh, I saw such and such a thing," but I didn't call it in. I didn't let the police know about that. Well, how it's very tricky. If we can only build that picture and understand what's going on out there if we're told things, and the more we're told, the better the understanding we have of it, and the better our response can be. So my advice to everybody would be, if you do see these things, call 999. It's better to call 999. We come, they've gone, and we've got no evidence, but we've at least attended and tried, than to not have been told about it at all.
And for just let me put this out there: you can remain anonymous and still report it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is one of them. If that's what you do, that's what you do. But it's definitely a very real problem. And do you think that your officers are more in danger when they go to even the domestic household call out now? Do you think that there's a more should I say, a more focused approach on what's coming out the front door kind of thing from say 10 years ago?
Yeah. I mean, police officers get assaulted every day, and it's a big problem, it's a big worry, and it's something that we have to take a zero tolerance approach to, similar to door staff. So it's, you have to be aware every time you go to a call, even if it's a call that perhaps seems relatively straightforward, you have to be aware of, there could be anything behind that front door. Probably in private properties is the most vulnerable places because there's easy access to weapons. We've already spoken about every house has a weapon inside. There's no CCTV and no one can tell you what's going on behind those doors. So that is when you're at your most vulnerable, perhaps.
Yeah. I can sit there and say that I've been in thousands of aggressive conflicts. I've been doing doors 33 years now, nearly 34. And out of all the conflicts, and I'll let you know, I've been stabbed twice, both times by a female, ironically enough. Once in New York, so I don't know if you might not be old enough to remember that, and another time when I was just outside Thursdays, and both times ironically by a female, and ironically both times we were trying to protect her other half and she thought we were fighting him. Not the case. But for you guys, you're going to these houses and you don't know what's behind the front door, and I think that most police officers 10, 15 years ago probably wouldn't take into or wouldn't really have a knife at the forefront of their things, whereas today I would say that you guys attending that would go, we need to know what weapons are here first.
Yeah, I think, it's always good to know if there's a weapon involved or mentioned before you get to the call. it's difficult to compare from 10 years ago. I'd say that the 90s and early 2000s was especially violent
Really?
with weapons. It might not have been in the same way it is now, but there was, I don't think we're seeing necessarily a huge increase in knife crime, but what we are seeing is a different reason for it. So, for example, county lines, gang culture, this kind of thing, it's a different environment to what it was 20 years ago. I worked in London for a number of years, and in East London there was a road called Murder Mile because a number of murders that happened on that road. But that was back in again late 90s, early 2000s.
Bet the houses were cheap.
Yes, they were. It's changed now with gentrification, but we won't go into that.
Yeah.
It's always been a risk. It's always been a threat.
Hmm.
It's we wear body cameras now, so
Yeah.
we can better capture evidence as soon as we get there.
Where possible, our guys do a number of. I mean, I work closely with your Mark Hawley.
Yeah.
I work very closely with him. He's great, by the way. I know he's trying to blag it because he's hurt his back at the minute. But I like the licensing. Paul, I get on very well with your licensing team. And for me, when they ask for things, genuinely there's a justifiable reason. And for me, I will always try and work with them because I don't think that I think that they're sensible in what they do. Every time we have doormen where we can put where we can put body cameras on them, we try. There is a bit of a conflict as to who owns the body cameras. So, like, if I own them, I'm the data controller, and they all get uploaded behind. And so a lot of the venues don't like to fork out for it because they're not cheap, especially if they're good. But I think that there is a justification now to say, you're on camera. If you're going to stab me, I'm filming you. And I say that again a bit tongue in cheek, but the reality is you're going to hear what was said. You're going to hear the tone of voice. You're going to see the guy. You're going to have some sort of CCTV evidence to show the aggression and what has stemmed him and what might just have triggered him off. And I think it can be used in so many positive ways. It did for me, actually, with one of your officers who tried to do me for speeding, and I proved that he was he wasn't telling the truth. But we'll get into that afterwards.
It's going to be sweaty.
Yeah. I can assure you, New Year's Eve, I got pulled over at 3 a.m. and I was following the police car. And he tried to tell me I was speeding. And I was like, well, I've been behind you from there. And then I got my phone out and said, oh, sorry, the camera. And I said, I can show you I've been behind you for the last 4 miles. He said, no, you haven't. Well, there it is on camera, mate. Anyway, that being said,
you make a good point there, because cameras, it goes both ways.
Yeah.
It can help us to understand what's happened and who's done what, but it can also protect you against malicious allegations.
well, that's the whole point. I mean, and the reality is, I mean, any festival, if I have a response team, and anyone who's SIA, they're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. But if we have response teams, we have an incident for whatever that is, and we're going to get you out of this event. Might be 4 or 5 of our lads coming along, and you might be struggling, you might be walking out, and you'll get to the front gate and go, my guys have just kicked shit out of you. And I'm like, no, they haven't, mate. We've got it on camera. We can see that they've walked you out. I've got CCTV that's filmed you on the way out. Somebody behind you's filmed you with a body camera. So when he says, oh, I've got a cut eye, and that's from the fight that he's had, and he'll say, oh, your doorman's just belted me, I want the police here. And we can go, there it is, mate. And the police take one look at it and go, yeah, good luck, mate, off you go. So it's absolutely there to protect us. It's there to gain evidence, gather that sort of stuff. And that's what it is. But let me ask you, what's the goal for Southampton? Have you got targets? Have you got... what's your goal? You're the inspector. Come on, tell me where you'd like to see...
We don't have targets as such. However, obviously, we have priorities, and that is, one of our priorities is violent crime, especially crime that involves weapons. So, what do we do for a priority crime that we don't do for another crime? Well, we would treat it more urgently, potentially, depending on what else is going on. Or we'd be looking for every avenue to be explored. We'd be looking to capture that early evidence, following those lines of inquiry, and getting the charges, and convictions that we need to. It's about getting the best outcome. So we want to decrease knife crime, and increase the outcomes for the crime we have. That would be my goal.
Yeah. That's
And-
fair enough. No, you know, for me to ask you this is because I genuinely, you know, I've never been a police officer, don't know your world, and you're an inspector. So I'm going to say to you, look, you know, what's an ideal situation and where do you want to see it heading?
You know, well, what I would say is I want to get rid of all knives off the street. You
Yeah.
know, I think we need to be realistic, but we want to be ambitious as well. So, you know, you look at how much knife crime there is in the city at the moment. You know, and it comes back to say I want to decrease that, and the crimes that we do have increase the outcome.
Yeah. What do you reckon, Gary? What do you see going forward for, say, the UK? Because you're not from down here, you're from. But if you said the UK, what do you think is a good starting point or an achievable target? Should we say that? You know, because it's not
Yeah.
going to happen in one go, but little bites to
Yeah.
get closer to where we need to be.
It needs to be a layered approach, you know. We need to look at the behaviour and why people are doing things like that. Take drunk. Knives aren't the problem, it's knife crime that's the problem. Take like drunk driving, you know. The answer to reducing drunk driving wasn't to ban everyone from drinking alcohol and to stop people from driving. It was to limit the access to those that promote that type of behaviour. So if we can address why people are carrying knives, why they feel like they're going to be justified in making an attack, if we address the consequences and then ultimately focus on the ability for people to access these, to carry them, to conceal them, to get away with it, that's the answer. We're doing a lot of work, well, we're looking to do a lot of work in schools as well, around violence as a whole, because knife crime is one thing, but it's the whole violent incident thing.
So
That's the other.
you just touched on something that I was going to touch on, and we may as well do it now. We're not America.
No.
We don't have at the moment. No, we do have incidents that are happening in our schools,
Yeah, there's
and
guns
it's
in schools.
becoming more and more prevalent, and it is becoming more and more of an issue. Now, we know, and I say this loosely, but we know that in America they have, you know, walk-in shootings, students, many, I don't know how many in America have happened, but a lot. I know that it's just happened now in Germany, you know, and
Austria.
What, is that not Germany?
No.
Oh, okay, there you go, didn't know that. But it's happened, and my question to you, Tim, would be, do you think schools need to consider, I'm not saying we need security guards at school, and I'm not saying that, you know, the schools should have tanks outside. What I'm saying is I think now there is a very realistic, sensible consideration that needs to be adopted by the school. That's my opinion, to say, can we, and what is the protocol? I have to do an emergency procedure with a festival. I have to do all of the things to keep people safe. Does a school have an emergency procedure in place should some nutter parent turn up, or somebody who's just having a bad fucking day? Let's be honest, and it could be that fucking mad. You know, like what happened with those poor little girls up in, is it Leeds? Where Stockport, that way. And for me, how a parent would continue
Southport.
is Southport?
Southport,
wasn't it?
not Stockport.
Yeah. But do you think that the schools should now be, and I say this tentatively, considering these things?
I think we'll find that most schools probably do have a procedure in place. You know, recent years, you know, I think that the landscape has changed slightly. There is a heightened risk. You know, we see these attacks.
I mean,
in
we know the
America.
school has the fire alarm drill. We know that the school practices that. But does the school say to the teachers, in this event, you know,
They do have lockdown events now take place. I know of a recent primary school in my local area who did a lockdown drill where all the children go underneath the tables, the teacher locks the door, they pull down all the curtains at the window. So that does happen. Hopefully that, you know, never has to be.
I hope,
activated for
yeah,
real,
I hope
of
we
course,
never
but
ever
it's,
implement that.
Yeah, most, you know, I think most schools now, I don't want to speak on behalf of all schools, you know, I don't know for sure, but I think a lot of schools now will have a procedure in place and security measures in place, whether that be, what doors are locked and not locked, who's checking the perimeter fence, CCTV cameras, lockdown procedures, what to do if somebody was to walk onto the premises and they don't know who that person is, and who tackles that person, who calls the police, that kind of thing. I think there probably is a procedure, and it can only improve. You know, because we haven't.
So I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, and a simple yes or no. Do you think that all schools should consider a procedure for a violent or a hostile person coming onto the school grounds?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, as a basic
And
precaution, I think that's essential. Yeah.
That sort of kills me to say that, because of you should never, in my eyes, a school shouldn't have to do that. You know, and my kids, they're, you know, one of them's 12 going on 19 with an attitude, and my son is barely, not even 10 yet, and their schools, and it doesn't matter what kids, all the kids are there. As a dad, I would feel compelled to protect the kids no matter what, and I'm sure that's the same for the teachers. But the fact that we are saying a school should have that policy, that procedure in place, just the same as if I have a concert and I have a show stop procedure. That show stop procedure for me has to be precise and needs to be on point with everything. And these schools, unfortunately, we're now saying to a school, you should be thinking about this procedure just in case. You agree with that, Gav?
Yeah, I do. You know, it's that classic adage, like, you know, like we teach a lot of unarmed combat and stuff like that, and we often get approached by people who say, well, I don't want to learn any of that stuff because I never want to get into a fight. Not knowing how to fight or not knowing how to punch doesn't make you immune from that thing happening. When I get in my car, I'm going to put on my seatbelt. That's not because I'm expecting to go in for a crash. It's a preventative measure just in case.
Yeah.
So I speak to a lot of school teachers and schools, and their biggest concern is, on one side, keeping themselves safe and making sure that they can do the job, help young people grow, develop, all that type of stuff. But on the other side, they don't want to turn their schools into prisons. They don't want metal detectors,
No.
CCTV cameras, and stuff.
And
like
I get that,
You
and
need to prepare.
I think, and I wouldn't want to see that, and I get exactly where they're coming from. We're not trying to turn these schools into the things, but the reality, the cold hard reality of today's living, is that there is different threats today, different potential issues today than there was 25, 30 years ago. I
Yeah.
mean, my dad used to say to me, you know, in the 60s, you could leave your front door open at your house. No one would come in your house and rob you. Unfortunately, you leave your car door unlocked for 10 minutes and something's gone. So that's just a sign of the world we live in today.
Yeah.
And I think the schools, you know, and I think there are sensible things that can be done. But unfortunately, the cold, hard truth is exactly what you just said. That has to be taken into account now, just in case.
Yeah, I think, you know, and this is going to be very controversial, but I think we should go as far as every single school, not even just every single school, but every building should have an active shooter protocol. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because
So now, let me ask you this question. Are you talking about middle schools, as in, or are we talking infants here?
infant
Are
schools.
we talking infants as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's still violent incidences there. What was that? That real famous one up in
Scotland, was
yeah,
that?
Dunblane. Yeah, that was a primary school, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Infant school where something happened there.
That's crazy.
We need to prepare. We need to stay at left of bang. You know, prevention is better than any cures.
Left of bang, I know what he means, but for any of you that don't know what left of bang means, I'll explain it later. But no, it's a controversial thing, and some of you guys might go, you know what? Yeah, and some of the guys that might listen to this that are parents, and there's a lot of you that are, you may say, you know what, I'd like to see that in the school. Ask the head teacher, say, is anything in place for that kind of thing? Yeah, not because we're expecting it, but just in case. And I think that's definitely something I think should be considered.
And,
you
and
know.
it doesn't need to be, like, whenever you start talking about preventative measures and stuff like that, again, people are scared. They think that you're just going to put up barriers all over the place and, you know, be wanding people as they go into school. It doesn't need to be as that. It just needs to be a policy so that when the shit hits the fan, they know whose job it is to go here, whose job it is to go there.
A
The kids are
polished
familiar.
drill,
Yeah.
polished drill,
We do,
some sort
we do
of
fire drills. Without,
exactly, yeah, and that's what I mean. So we do the fire drills. We get the kids out. We know where the muster point is. The teacher does the register. We get them out, and I remember as a kid being told, "Walk quietly, Marcel. Stop talking. Shush." And
Yeah.
get out, and I'd stand still, Marcel, because I was that kind of kid. But the reality is, if a different alarm goes off, so the fire bell goes off, we know what it is. But if a different alarm goes off, the school has a totally different tone that maybe only the teachers should know, and the kids would know. If that tone goes off, you get under the tables. The teacher locks the door. If that is what is agreed, I guess. And, you know, we're spitballing here and we're sort of coming out with these things. And we might have just come up with something that gets pushed through policy at some point. You never know. But, right, we'll summarise this up then. So we'll talk about Southampton as we're down here. We think that we can improve it, and I'm pretty sure you guys are going to be on it. And hopefully we can reduce some stuff. Anything that you want to say at the end?
Yeah, I mean, look, it is a problem, and you know we're working hard to deal with it, but we can't police our way out of it on our own. So, you know, my appeal to all the listeners would be, you know, put the knives down, encourage other people to put their knives down, work with people who you think might be at risk. You know, identify those risks early, get the right partners involved, so we can intervene and we can, you know, society can change the culture that we have, and we can reduce knife crime.
Brilliant. Last things from you, Gary?
Yeah, just want to echo what Tim says. Really, it's all part of that layered approach. Like you don't have to be a security officer to raise concern to other people. You know, like if everybody goes out there and says, right, it is my number one duty to stop crime before it happens, or to spot these events. Yeah, that's all it is. Like each and every person here is almost an extension of the overall security structure. Like, and that's door supervisors, it's general public, it's retail staff. You've all got the power to be able to spot these things and then raise concerns.
And raise it. Fair enough. Okay, guys, we'll draw it to an end. I hope that everyone has enjoyed it. I hope everybody who's listened in and watched the video, share it far and wide. I think it's a subject that is across the board. I'd like to take the opportunity to say thank you to Tim. Thanks very much for coming.
Thank you.
He's come from Southampton, and I've got Gary all the way down from his neck of the woods up there. And but once again, guys, thanks very much for listening, and hopefully you find it interesting. Please let me know your thoughts, and hopefully we'll do another one very soon. Thanks, guys.